Okay, let's do problem 57 inside interval. So here we're given an array of intervals that are in ascending order, which means they are sorted and it's not overlapping. But we also have this new interval, and when this is introduced to our intervals, there will be some overlapping, so we have to return intervals so that they're not overlapping. So when we look at the example 2, we have the following intervals, and then we have new interval 4 and 8. Just by looking at it, we do know that it's going to start overlapping from 3 to 5 all the way to 8 to 10. So our output will be 1 and 2, and then 3, 10, and then 12 and 16. So what's the logic for solving this question? So we can actually split them into 3 steps. So the first one is adding all the intervals before overlapping. The second one is adding the overlapping interval, and the third one is adding the remaining non-overlapping intervals. So before we do that, let's have a look at our output. Output is an array of an array, but we do not know the size of it, so we can't just declare it and use them. Instead of doing that, we can create a list of integer array, which I'm going to call it merged, and then it's going to be of new array list. So we can put the intervals into our merged and then change them to merged to array. But there should be something else going to the parameter, but we'll come back to that. So the first step, adding all the non-overlapping intervals into merged. How do we know the overlapping does not take place? So doesn't take place. So we have 1 and 2 and 4 and 8. We do know that there isn't any overlapping. How do we know it? Because this 2 is smaller than 4. So the first one will be a while loop. But before we write down the while loop, we do need some variables. So I'm going to have int I equals 0, and then I'm going to have int n equals intervals by length. Okay, so this 4, so this 2 should be smaller than 4. So what's the general logic for that? So intervals I 1, if that is smaller than new interval 0, we can just add them in, but we also have to write down our bound. I is less than n. Okay, so that's our and then so we just need to do merge that add intervals I, simple, and then I plus plus. So after this while loop, we will have 1 and 2 in our merged. So that means 1 and 2 is out of the picture. And after this while loop, that's when the overlapping takes place. But if you look at our output carefully, there's one thing to be careful. We are not adding any of them. We are just adding 3 and 10. So we're essentially getting the smallest value of the overlapping intervals and then getting the largest value of the overlapping intervals. And another thing is we have to know when the overlapping ends. So we do know that overlapping ends at this point, but how do we know it? Because this 8 is greater than 3, so we do know that overlapping takes place, but this 8 is smaller than 12, so it can't, there is no way it can overlap. So the condition for our while loop is, again, I is less than n, and then new interval 1 is greater than or equal to intervals I 0. In that case, that's overlapping. And the thing I said earlier, we are getting the minimum and the maximum of those intervals. So to do that, we can just simply update our new interval. So it'll be new interval So how do we update it? I said minimum and maximum, so we can just use math.min. So interval 0, and then it would be that would be new interval 0. New interval 0, and then intervals I 0. And we can do the same thing, except it's going to be max, and it will be 1 and 1. Essentially, these this min line and max line will be will only be used once, meaning that this value will only be updated once, one in the beginning, one at the end. And after we get the overlapping intervals, we just simply add merge.add new interval. So we will have 3 and 10. Yeah. So we will have iterated these 3 intervals, and then we are just left with the remaining intervals. So to add them in, it's very simple. I is less than n, and merged add intervals I, and then we can do I plus plus. Right, so we are going to return merged array, merged to array, but because if we do that, we are returning all the elements as an array, but we want to return them as an array of an array. So we can simply say new int and then specify the size. So intervals merged the size like that, so that the program understands that we are trying to return an array of an array. So let's run the test. Okay, it's working. Let's submit. Okay, it's 98%, so I'm happy with the result. Right, and because we are essentially calling them sequentially, the time complexity of this one will be O of n, and then space complexity will also be O of n.